everybody, and welcome back to the Star Wars Expanded Universe, narrated by Disney or Lucasfilm, whichever way you slice it. Legends. Again, I don't know how that ended up becoming a catchphrase. It just started saying it, and then it became a thing, so I kept going with it. And I say this every once in a while because it always just messes with me. Here's the thing. A little controversial, but highly loved by, or accepted, I should say, by many of the EU fan of the likes of Christopher Nelson, Lance, Matt Wilkins, and if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for me. But I have reviewed this earlier than some of the other stuff I've reread. Um, because I had to get on that hype train when it was finally released on Amazon. I had to talk about it. It was the only time I ever went out of chronological order to review something, and because I just felt it was big enough that it had to be talked about. That being said, it's still a very interesting story, and for those of you who haven't heard it, that is, of course, The Heart of the Jedi, which of course is backwards for you, by Kenneth C. Flint. Now, what is so peculiar about this book? Well, first off, it's pretty hard to get this now. I think I got this for 15 bucks. I've seen it ranging for pretty pricey now, if you still find it online, except that it's also been taken down on Amazon because, of course, this isn't an official book. But for a time, you can also go on the Expanding Universe website. Just you'd have to go back a bit, but to see this, which is that for a time, for like the first 2 weeks, that this was the number one Star Wars book being sold, beating out the official canon books coming out. So, what is the story behind The Heart of the Jedi before I even get into the plot of Heart of the Jedi? Well, it is, of course, a man named Kenneth C. Flint, who you might recognize from Tales from Jabba's Palace and Tales from Mos Eisley, was a writer that was commissioned to write a book during the early Bantam years. However, he talks about it a little bit in this book, but some things were going on, and at the end of the day, he ended up not being able to have his book released to the public, but they still paid him the 10,000 advance, and they gave him a bone by letting him write a couple short stories within those two tales. But his book was never able to be released, and so it was never a part of the official continuity. Therefore, you can technically say that this is non-canon. However, it doesn't contradict anything. In fact, since Joe Bongiorno helped with this story after the fact, it is pretty consistent with the expanding universe. So while it is not officially a part of the EU, I say you can accept it into your EU chronological read. Um, Now, in 2015, if I'm remembering my uh, time correctly, this story was released for free on Joe Bongiorno's website, StarWarsTimeline.net, where you can still read it for free on the website. As for getting a physical copy, if you are going to want it now in 2022, it's going to be a bit pricey. I got this for $15. I did not buy extra copies because I did not want to be greedy. I wanted as many people to be able to buy it as possible, so I bought one. But now you got prices ranging pretty bad. But if you just want to read the story, it is easily accessible on StarWarsTimeline.net. Just look up StarWarsTimeline.net. Heart of the Jedi should be pretty easy to find. But yeah, the reason why I said Joe Bongiorno helped wrote it, he didn't help write it originally. When it got released on his website, he helped just minor things to correct to make sure that it was in line with continuity. And since there is shapeshifters involved in the plot, there's mentions of the Shidu from the Galaxy of Fear series, and of course the Claudites from the prequels, just so you know, there's a little bit more continuity there because Joe Bongiorno is all about continuity. Now, I placed it here. Most of the timelines usually place it before the X-Wing comics, but I just decided first 20 issues, the X-Wing comics, this book, then Shadows of Mindor, then the rest of the X-Wing comics. But it is about Luke trying to discover what he really wants to do, because he's kind of, episode 4, he's thrust into this adventure, and then for the next couple years he's just helping the rebellion, and stuff has not stopped. He learned to become a Jedi, he's doing all this stuff, But what does he really want to do? Does he really want to dedicate his entire life to the pursuit of, being a Jedi? And that's kind of what this book deals with. It also, deals with Han and Leia a little bit in their relationship, which was nice. I have bullet points here. Uh, the opening scene was absolutely wonderful. It was very reminiscent because I have seen the clip. Um, in the Mandalorian season one, was it one or was it two? Regardless, there's a hallway scene with Luke Skywalker, and it felt very similar, or I guess that felt very similar to this, where Luke is just going to town on these guys, and it was a really fun scene. Um, we also get introduced to our villains for this book. It's interesting. So the Imperial Senate was disbanded uh, right at the beginning of episode 4, but now that the Emperor is dead, they're trying to retry for peace with the New Republic, which it has been. Issue 108 also did a soft retcon for it, but here it even mentions how it was the Alliance of Free Planets, and recently redubbed, the New Republic. So this also establishes that. But we get introduced to Admiral Thrakus, who is probably the weakest part of this book for me because he's I don't know, he's just evil for the sake of being evil, and I just didn't really vibe. I think the only thing that's changed for me, because I still really enjoyed this book, the only thing that's really changed for me in my opinion of it is that I just think that Thrakus is rather weak. He's a rather Jedi Prince level. Like, it would work if the entire tone of the book was to be that silly, but it's not. The book takes itself fairly seriously, and so he just is not a good contrast for what the story is going for, in my opinion. But he does hate the Force at the beginning, which quickly switches when he realizes he can use the Force to further his power. Um, but as I said, there's prequel connections to justify politics now, which is really nice. We get mentions of the Separatists, from the prequel era, and all that stuff. Mon Mothma's talking to, Luke and Han and Leia at the beginning of the book, and I thought that was really cool. And as always, I mentioned this during my Jedi Force review all the way back during the Rebellion, or the Jedi Force, the Rebel Force. I'm sorry. There's just a really nice Han and Luke moment because Luke decides he has to go figure some things out on his own, and then Han comes to talk to him, and it was just a really sweet moment. And for those of you who've followed me for long enough, I am very much a character first guy, whether that be to my detriment as, being a legitimate critiquer of fiction. Everybody has their preferences. I mean, I would like a good plot. I think, for example, not to get too off topic, there's a show called Babylon 5, I think, or Star Trek. I think it does an excellent job of, especially DS9, of having character centric stories while also having an overarching plot story. I would love to have both, but if I have to sacrifice one, I vastly prefer character moments, or just characters. I don't know if study is the right word, but just in depth character moments, which is why Traitor has turned out to be one of my favorite books in all of the EU, which the majority is just a character piece on Jason Solo. But that being said, that's why I gravitate toward these sort of scenes. This book obviously has a plot. I think the plot is decent, not the greatest thing ever, but I appreciate that's Discord. But I appreciate those little moments between characters a lot. Um, there is also, if you can hear that, brother, apologies. There is a wonderful moment where Luke heads on back to Tatooine because he's trying to search for himself and what he should do, and um, so he goes to Tatooine and he ends up going back to the homestead, which I thought at first was going to be a contradiction to the 3D series, which I have read. I didn't read it the first time, so I was like, ooh, contradiction, but it's Joe Bongiorno. How could he miss this? But of course, Luke did mention that there was for a time a guy he had sold it to from the 3D comics, but he eventually gave up on it too, which kind of pisses on that comic a little bit. But I mean, that's okay. At least it's acknowledged, which I thought it wasn't going to be at first. It probably wasn't in the original draft, but then he was like, oh, well, this actually happened in this 3D comic, so let me just add this or whatever. Um, but we never truly got to see Luke, I feel, truly mourn his loss, because so much went on. He didn't have time. I mean, it was mentioned here and there, but I never felt like he really got to get closure from that moment. So it was just a really, really beautiful scene to me, or just a really nice little scene. I'm almost tearing up over it. Oh my god. Just having Luke, talk, dead, but talking to the graves of his aunt and uncle and being like, we didn't always agree on everything, but I still loved you and I miss you. Paraphrasing, but it was just like, it was such a nice little moment, and I really approved of it. Faith and doubt. I don't try to get political or I don't try to shove my beliefs onto people, but this is a channel about my thoughts about, you know, so if it feels relevant, I'll bring it up. If I ever hear somebody complain about what I say though on like Instagram or something, Instagram is a place to be about me, my life. So if you don't want to hear about me and what I think, then I guess you don't want to be my friend then. I mean, like, I don't know. That's just like, that's the place where I can express myself. But that being said, it's just a little thing. Luke talks about, like, he's gone this path, but he doesn't always know if this is something he should um, follow. He learned from Yoda. He did all this. He trained, and he in the moment, he's caught up in everything. He's believing what he's got to do, but now that he has time to think, it's like, do I really believe that this is something I should be doing? Do I even trust myself to be able to accomplish this? Um, and so it's just a little thing of like having doubt about the Force, because Force in this universe is basically a god, if you can call it that. It is the spiritual thing that is an actual reality within the universe. And so, in the same sense that I just want to mention how, you know, anybody who has faith, Lance can, from, Star Wars EU Teen, Lance L on YouTube, um, can relate to, having faith and yet not always being 100% sure, because I think anybody who says that is lying to themselves. But even Luke Skywalker, who has the Force and has all this ability, it's still a lot to deal with and to never doubt in a sense. And so I just really, I don't know if I'm even explaining myself properly. I really appreciated his struggle he had in this book, and I could relate to in a sense, because I think I've personally gotten to the point where I intellectually, I know, you know beyond a shadow, not beyond a shadow, beyond a reasonable doubt, that what I believe is true. But emotions are a fickle thing, which is why nobody should ever allow emotions to control them. No, never always follow your emotions. You can follow your emotions in some things, but always back it up with logic and reasoning, because your emotions will betray you, sometimes. Um, anyway, little side tangent. I just really appreciated that little aspect that was added in this book. I don't even know if that was necessarily the intention. It probably wasn't, but it was something insightful that I connected with, I guess I should say. So I appreciated that. We get to see the Sand People again. This is there's different tribes though. So this tribe is a certain tribe. And they talk about how Ben Kenobi even taught them some things, which was interesting. Would have loved to see a story about that. Um, but they, he basically gets in this whole thing where he has to do like a trial by combat thing. And I love that Luke doesn't want to use the Force to cheat. And so he, you know, wants to go in fair and square. There is a mysterious sand person that is willing to help him, not cheat, but give him a good pointer on which bantha he should take. We'll get back to that in the future, but so he does, and he's okay. Also, C-3PO, this little side plot, it is important to the main plot, but C-3PO gets kidnapped by the main villains, Thrakus and all of them. Um, and he basically gets not mind wiped, but he gets reprogrammed, and so he's kind of like this evil, sarcastic C-3PO, and he's gonna help uh, lead the villains to where Luke's going because they're gonna go after them too. But C-3PO, is always bossed around by Han and stuff. So when there's a moment where he like makes a fat joke to Han, and he's like, "Did he just say that to me?" And it was just a really fun moment. Um, there's also this wonderful scene. I think it's the only time we've ever got to see this outside of the movies. Yoda's ghost appears to Luke, which I just thought was awesome. And I don't have too much to say about that scene other than it was wonderful. Now we're going to jump ahead of it because there's a little bit more like, Luke meets an Ewok that can talk. Without spoilers, everything may not be as it appears, but there is a Ewok that can talk that is helping Luke reach his destination. Meanwhile, um, peace talks get broken up because Thrakus tries to destroy it, and so Han and Leia figure out what's going on with C-3PO and realize that the Empire's after, or at least this section is after Luke. So Leia uses a little bit of her ability in the Force because she hasn't been trained or anything yet. It's before the Thrawn trilogy, but knowing that she's the sister of Luke Skywalker, she knows that she has that too. So she has a faint sense. It kind of guides the two storylines or the two side plots. I don't know what I'm trying to say. The Luke story and the Han and Leia story, and converges them on this planet near the end. But before Leia and Han get there, Luke is stopped first because before the planet is this hippie society. This I don't know how they describe it, like a biomass of ships that each contain the atmosphere of original planets. It's kind of kooky, but they basically have escaped. It's in the unknown regions. They've escaped from their homes and societies to live a peaceful life. They want no war. And it was a whole like little section of the book, which I thought was fine. Um, it wasn't. I didn't really vibe with it too much. It wasn't horrible, but it was kind of like, why is this here? I mean, it was another example of Luke having a temptation to um, step away from his responsibility, because before that the Ewok was like, you could just go fly off with me, you can go have adventures, you don't gotta do this anymore, and then this society's like, you can just lead us, we can just like live in harmony together, man, and smoke weed and stuff, man. And okay, I didn't say that, but it's just like, I don't know, it's fine, I get why it's there, but it wasn't, second time through, wasn't exactly super relevant or very interesting to me personally. Um, but I did feel sad when the Empire finally does come around and they do some stuff. So that's all I'll say. There is an Ewok twist that I'm not going to get into. Those who read the book or read it online, you'll know what it is. I thought it was a fine little thing. I mean, second time through, it's definitely more noticeable than the first time, I'll say. And so the last little bit of the book becomes very Indiana Jones, because they reach the heart of the Jedi. Um, and there's an obvious one, which is very Indiana Jones, which is that Luke has to step onto this pit, and just have faith that when he puts his foot into the darkness, that he's still going to be on something solid. And of course he is, which is almost something directly from the third Hans frick the third Indiana Jones film, The Last Crusade. Yes. And so that was a lot of fun. But of course, by the end of the story, Thrakus is defeated, our heroes win, and Anakin shows up. Anakin Skywalker shows up as like this angel like. He's in white robes. He's telling Luke that you can become oneness with the Force, like Jason Solo would become in New Jedi Order, but you have to really know that this is the path you want and all that and da 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 and Luke's like, you know, I know that I want to keep helping my friends and stuff, but I don't know where I'm at, so I'll come back to this, which obviously they never do because this book was never actually a part of the canon. But it's still interesting. I think the biggest issue, I guess, would be the whole Heart of the Jedi thing because it's nowhere in the prequels. It's nowhere in the Old Republic. It's just kind of a thing that's invented for this book, which obviously, nobody knew anything about the prequels back when he was writing this. But it's just like, it's kind of a weird little MacGuffin. What's it called? The like plot device thing that's introduced, and I wasn't too fond of that. I think the main story overall is fairly weak, if I'm being honest. I think though there's a lot of great character moments that save it for me. I think the journey of this story is a lot of fun and is why I like it a lot. But as for the rest of it, I don't know. It's maybe I'm sounding more negative than I'm meaning to. I really enjoyed this book. I just think that trying to look at it a little bit more critically, um, main plot isn't like the greatest thing ever. Um, but I did have a lot of fun with it, and it is so unique. And I mean, I gotta say, I'm very happy to have this because I got it for $15. Other people are paying like 200 or more for this damn book, so I'm very happy to have this. But as I said, if you just want to know the story, you can read it for free on StarWarsTimeline.net. But it is definitely one of my most prized EU. I know it's kind of debatable, but it's one of my most prized EU possessions just because like me and Lance can show this around and be like, yo, we got this. Chris can be like, we got this. Matt Wilkins had got it even earlier with a hardcover. He's like, I got this. Not everybody can do that, so that's pretty awesome. So, but yeah, I gotta head to work. But this has been a lot of fun. I enjoyed re-talking about this book. It's still a lot of fun. I still really enjoy it. I'm glad that this was leaked on Amazon illegally. So, and I'm glad I got a copy of it. Um, and look, it looks like something that would come out of Bantam, doesn't it? And look at that. It's so like, it's so Bantam era. I love it. It even has a little Bantam Spectre thing at the freaking front of it. I love that. And of course, no Legends banner. That's another plus. Man, you guys don't know how lucky and how blessed I feel to actually own it. It's so great. But yeah, I do recommend it. I do think it's worth your time. So I hope you check it out. Um, this filled me with joy. I loved it. Had a lot of fun with it, and I hope you will too if you haven't read it yet. And if you already have, please let me know what you thought about this book in the comment section below. Up next, I have the only Stover novel in Star Wars, at least, that I have not read yet. Yes, my friends, we have Luke Skywalker and the Shadows of Mindor. What a title! And we'll see how I feel about that in the next video. Till then, may the Force be with you.